Hey YouTube, Turtleags here, bringing you a long overdue video. This is an updated regular arena video, not Supreme Arena, regular arena video, where I will talk about the most common archetypes, team archetypes for free-to-play / early game, the mid-game, and then the end game. And I'm kind of looking to the side at my notes because this is my second recording. Chat, you guys can say hi to YouTube, your future self, your mom, and my viewers are going to help me out as I talk about each of these teams and show you the defensive and offensive formations. My viewers are going to chime in and kind of correct me as I go along or fill in the gaps as I go along, offering alternatives. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. First, let's talk about the free-to-play and early game. So I would say that the early game is going to consist of definitely a Cessia, because you do get Cessia at the 7-day login, which kind of shapes the remainder of your lineup, because most people who run Cessia will have Graveborn on their radar, and thus, you know, with even a little bit of research or maybe some experience, would know that Thorn is one of the best tanks in the game, not only because of his ability to keep your team alive, but also his ability to do a ton of damage and be a secondary DPS. So you would have something like a Thorn Cessia, and then you would have one of 3 or 4 healers. You would either have Smokey, you would have Haywin, Rowan, and or Damien. As a rule of thumb, when it comes to team building 101, you want to have 1 to 2 tanks, 1 to 2 supports, and then 2 to 3 DPSs. So usually I go 2-1 or 1-2, where it's 2 tanks, 1 support, or 1 tank, 2 supports. I think it's fair to say that usually for people who only have like 1 to 2 copies of each S rank hero, most of them will go probably 2 tanks. And actually, if you're struggling in the early game against Vala, excuse me, you probably want to run 2 tanks. One flavor would be something like putting a secondary tank in the back to catch opposing Valas, who is a very strong DPS who you will meet sooner or later. The way Vala works is that she basically snipes one of the back row units, the one that is furthest away from her. For instance, if Vala is placed here, they will target Entendre. So you want to put your secondary tank in the backmost slot if you can. And then in terms of healers, I think that the top 2 best healers to accompany Cessia is the one that everyone's familiar with, Rowan, or our newest healer, Ludovic. Although as a free-to-play low spender, I recommend skipping the rate ups, because you get half as much likelihood to get an A rank on the rate up banner versus the standard banner. So for this reason, realistically, I think Rowan is going to be the support of choice. Not only because Rowan is a support who is able to give energy to Cessia, but Rowan also gives energy to, 2 to 3 heroes, which could be, Cessia and someone like, if you didn't run an Entendre, you could run a Coco, who provides a 45% damage mitigation. Coco is a very free-to-play friendly support who is able to provide 45% damage mitigation without an EX weapon. And if you don't have Coco, or you want to try something different, you can also run Haywin, as one viewer suggested earlier. And in terms of your other DPS, you could consider someone like an Odie, who will be someone you'll build anyways for the Dream Realm. Or if you wanted a different option, you could also consider Viperian, who is someone who will get replaced later on, I think. But in the early game, he can provide some good damage against multiple enemies. And not to mention, there's something excuse me, called faction bonuses, where if you want to get additional bonuses to your attack and HP, you want to run at least 3 heroes of the same faction. So as you can see here, because I have a Thorin, a Cessia, and a Viperian that all belong to the Graveborn faction, so I got a 10% attack and HP bonus. Ludovic in early game would be crazy. Yeah, absolutely crazy, agree. Yeah, Rowan is everywhere on lower ranks in Arena. Yeah, so for, you know, Arena, I would recommend Rowan, and with Rowan you do have an avenue where you have Haywin, so you double support Rowan, Haywin, and Thorn as your primary tank. This is very powerful because not only does Rowan provide energy to your Cessia to allow her to ult faster to summon Mr. Carlisle the Beast, but also Rowan provides energy to Haywin, allowing her to ult faster. And Haywin is one of the really burst healing supports in this game, because when she casts her ultimate, she does something called Prayer Rain, where she blankets the entire map with healing rain for 9 seconds, and basically providing continuous amounts of healing to any of your allies on the map. Alright, so that is pretty much the early game. Now the mid game, let's talk about 2 different team comps, the Eironn comp and the Vala comp. Let's briefly talk about the Vala comp first. And mind you, Vala and Eironn can be combined together, but if you wanted a dedicated Vala comp, like a refined one of my favorite comps is Lucius in the front. And Lucius, by the way, is seeing more play in Song of Strife because of his season ability. But, you know, season abilities don't work in regular Arena, but I'm just saying, like, Lucius is worth building later on. Okay, and so you got Lucius, you got Tamisi in the back. Tamisi is a hero you'll probably build at some point for the Dream Realm, specifically the Necro Dragon. And then you'll have someone like Rowan, and then you'll have like a Vala, and then you typically, I recommend having 3 DPSs on your team. Since Lucius is a dedicated tank, we have some damage from Tamisia, some damage from Vala, and we have some damage from the support mage Cassidy, who is a hero that you're probably going to build for Dream Realm as well. So this is another team that I very much enjoy. And sorry, I forgot about the artifacts here. Eventually, once you progress far enough into the story, you'll unlock all 6 of these artifacts. Now, how do you decide which artifact to choose? I would say that as a rule of thumb, if you have access to all 6 of the spells, then the confining spell is the most powerful spell in Arena PvP. And the reason for that is because this spell is able to imprison up to 3 enemies periodically, which means that they are locked to the ground, cannot move, cannot act. They don't attack you, they can't heal, nothing. And that is insanely powerful. And then later on, I'll talk about some niche teams that work well with the Enlightening spell. Alright, so Confining spell, as a rule of thumb, if you haven't progressed far enough into the story yet, starting off, you'll probably start off with the Awakening spell, Enlightening spell, and if you purchase something, then you get the Blazing spell as well. I'd probably just go with the Awakening spell or the Enlightening spell, one of those. And when you unlock the Iron Wall spell, I do think that this is a good spell to transition to. And then eventually you'll unlock the Star Shard spell and Confining spell. If you want more damage, you can run the Star Shard, but generally speaking, I do think Confining spell is more powerful. Alright, so this is the Vala team. And then let's talk about the Eironn team. The Eironn team, even if you don't have Eironn Mythic Plus, if you have him strong enough, I think this is a good team to segue into. You'll have something like Thorin, Eironn, Damien, Arden, and then in the 5th slot you can either run Haywin or you can run Carolina. These are all very powerful teams, and I would say that if your Eironn's not well built, like you don't have the EX weapon yet, I would recommend, if you have Doran Mythic Plus, to have Eironn be the one to form the pact with Doran in order to get 50% damage reduction and have that damage transferred over to Thorin. But once you have Eironn Mythic Plus, and once your Eironn is invested enough to where he doesn't die as easily, then I would actually do something like this. By the way, someone mentioned before that I didn't account for positioning for Reinier team. So why don't we start talking about that? Now, what is a Reinier team? Reinier teams basically, Reinier is this hero right here. And the thing about Reinier is that he dynamic balances one of your heroes with the enemy hero, and that creates stat manipulation where the Reinier's ally gets an attack boost and damage boost, and the dynamic balanced hero gets some stat reduction and increased damage taken. So for this reason, that's why I like this map very much, because it is asymmetrical. So if I was to specifically counter Reinier teams, which is something you don't need to worry about until mid-game typically, then I would probably position something like this. Yeah, something like this, where there's no tiles to dynamic balance. So if you're worried about your heroes being dynamic balanced by Reinier, I would do something like this. Arena map 3, you get to choose one of 5 maps. If you're trying to, on the defensive side, not be torn apart by Reinier teams, then I would recommend a formation like this. Just basically mix and match, put your heroes on these 5 tiles that I have placed right here. And I would recommend having your tank in the middle, because most of the heroes will actually go in this direction. But occasionally a hero will kind of go this direction. And so this is where, if you really wanted to be careful, you could run your secondary front line like Eironn, or your secondary tank somewhere over here, if you're really worried about your main DPSs being sniped on that side. Okay, so now that we've talked about that, the most I see in my leaderboard is Thorin and Arden on the side, actually. Oh, like that. Oh, okay. Actually, this does make a lot of sense. And the reason for that is because your primary tank will go this way. And, yeah, can really hurt your back row. Actually, this team, this lineup, this positioning is better for the Eironn team. Thank you, Aishao. I have seen that. Okay, so, I did want to talk about Ulmus and Ulsa. So with Eironn teams, there's actually a different kind of lineup that you can do if you want to spice things up a little bit. So you got Ulmus, and you have Ulsa. So this is kind of like a flavor of an Eironn team where it's more crowd controlling than usual. So something like this. Basically, the way this team works is that Ulmus, the way he works is that he has a passive. Where are you? Yeah. Whenever an enemy target is knocked down, knocked into the air, or affected by other displacement effects, Ulmus binds the target to the ground, increasing the knockdown duration by 2 seconds, dealing X amount of damage. Yeah, so when the knockdown is basically where the enemies get knocked down to the ground and they don't move or act. Very powerful for AFK stage pushing, but also very powerful in arena PvP. And the thing about Ulsa is that she has the ability to create terrain. That's, creates earth pillars that knocks back enemies on those tiles by 1 tile. So basically the combination of Ulsa and Ulmus you know, is quite powerful. Not to mention also has very powerful synergy with Arden, because Arden, he does crowd control, and actually initially he crowd controls 2 enemy heroes, but later on he, with his EX weapon unlocked, he crowd controls 5 enemy heroes. And Ulsa has a clause in her kit where Ulsa senses the vibrations of ley lines to locate all enemies recently affected by control effects, which would be Eironn, would be Ulmus, Ulsa herself, and Arden. And heck, even Damien, because Damien is able to stun, blind, etc., etc. And she ends up doing extra damage when that happens. So this is actually another team. If you're bored of the traditional teams, or you just need to bring the spice, then I think this team can be quite powerful. So thank you to one of my viewers for suggesting that. Okay, so now that we've talked about the mid game, oh, and let me just go back to the Vala comp to show you what I would recommend for Vala if you need positioning assistance that counters Reinier. So I would do something like this.
What kind of treasure awaits us today?
I would actually put Vala probably somewhere here. Either here or here. You have your Thorin, or you have your Lucius.
Sir Lucius, at your service.
Lucius, Rowan, Temesia. And Temesia I would actually put over here. So by putting Temesia here, you can actually catch opposing Valas. I'll actually put probably here, and then Cassidy here.
This is for research.
So I'll do something like this. Yes. Yeah, for the Vala comp. And Temesia will catch. And by positioning the heroes this way, an opposing Reinier has no enemy to dynamic balance, which works in your favor. Vala is able to snipe someone from the opposite side without being sniped herself. So I do like this formation a lot. You could also, instead of Cassidy, run Corrin. And Corrin is a hero who some of you guys will build for the Dream Realm, if I can find him. However, I think that in a PvP situation, actually this could work quite well. So that's another alternative. Cassidy or Corrin. Merrily, I don't recommend as much, just because even though Merrily is another DPS, well, actually this could work too. I have tried this before, but Vala is probably the main damage dealer, and my favorite variation is where, because Cassidy, she is a high damage dealer, and she supplements the damage that Vala does. So I like this team composition quite a lot. Okay, so now moving on to the end game. So for the end game, I have notes for 3 different teams. Let's talk briefly about the final form, if you will, of Eironn teams that are quite powerful. So it would be something like this.
Are you calling me?
Damien.
The world has its own.
So it would be
Check out
like
Nature's
this.
invention.
Thorin.
Everyone must pay a price.
So it could be something like this. So the way this team works is that you have 2 of the strongest healers in the game, Damien and Haywin, to keep your team from dying, and more importantly, keep your team topped up in HP as much as possible. Because when you reach the end game, you're going to face opposing Scarlitas, and Scarlita, if your heroes even have a smidge amount of damage taken, an opposing Scarlita that is like EX20, even Paragon, could theoretically AoE down your heroes and knock them out of the map. So for this reason, I do recommend running a double healer. I would recommend Damien and Haywin, because Haywin provides 36% damage mitigation, damage reduction for the entire team when she ults. And then Damien, because even if Damien gets KO'd, he will revive, and he has so many crowd control kits which can really help your team out. And then you have Thorn, who is a tank and main damage dealer, Eironn to group enemies together and do quite a bit of damage himself, and then finally Scarlita as kind of the finisher, but also someone who keeps your team alive early on. This team is not only powerful offensively, but is actually the best defensive formation in this game, in my opinion. Another flavor of this comp, which is incredibly powerful, is a comp like this. If you're like a Giga Whale, where you can afford multiple Celestials and Hypogenes. This team is incredibly difficult to beat. I have a hard time having over a 50% win rate against this team. And mind you, teams like this where you're running Damien and Haywin is insanely powerful on defense, because it offers you a second win condition where even if you are running this team on defense and cannot KO all 5 of the enemies, usually you do, but sometimes you don't, you can still outstall your opponent to where the opponent can't kill you, and when the timer runs out, you still win. Turtle, where's your pierogies? Oh, I have some Georgian dumplings in the fridge. Yeah, but I'm filming a video. You are on YouTube, Rasta. Hello, hello. The problem with tanks are that are not Thorn in Arena is that they are all vulnerable to OD. That's true, that's true. Yeah, so, okay, so now that we've talked about Eironn... Oh, and by the way, guys, if you don't have a Scarlita, a team like this is still going to be quite powerful. Just know that this team, even though it is very powerful on defense, may not be enough damage. Actually, I would say if you don't have a Scarlita, you're probably going to run a team comp like this. Yeah, something like that. And I positioned the heroes this way so that Eironn would counter opposing Valas. So something like this, or you could do something like this. Except the problem with this is that you might not have enough damage. That's what I'm concerned about. Yeah, so I would much rather, if you don't have a Scarlita, just run Carolina and Arden together. Either Carolina and Arden, or Arden and Talene if you like pulled one copy of her, or pulled some copies of her. I think that could be quite powerful. So something like this could be very powerful as well. Okay, so let's move on to Dionel comps. Can only speak for my leaderboard again, but Haywin teams win against Carolina. Okay, good to know. Thank you, Aisha. Yeah, guys, if you have something in your experience, please share, because my experience is going to be different from your experience, just because the teams I face will be different, and so I'll set up my teams differently. Okay, so let's talk about Dionel next. And Dionel is the kind of archetype that will encourage you to run Enlightening Spell instead of Confining Spell, because the way Dionel works is that, well, first of all, he needs a lot of babying. So if you're going to run Dionel, you have to run Thorn, because Thorn invested enough will take 50% of the damage that Dionel takes, so long as they remain linked together. And then you're going to either run Smokey or you are going to run Leica. And the reason for this is because Smokey and Leica are two of the heroes that are able to buff your Dionel, a temporary buff, at the start of battle, which will allow Dionel to get one intoxication stack from Enlightening Spell, a second intoxication stack from Leica or Smokey, and then the third buff will, most people will run a Scarlita here, and then in my opinion I would run a secondary DPS, although if you are running Leica, you probably don't have room for a secondary DPS, so you would then run a Damien. Now Damien's really nice because he offers haste to your weakest ally, or he does the inspired chariot thing where he provides haste to your party, so that's another buff. For me personally, I'm just going to tell you the team that I'm comfortable with, which is this team right here. This is the team that I have the greatest success with for Dionel personally. But I know I have some viewers who prefer Leica over Smokey or Damien. So it would be like this team, or it would be a Smokey team. The problem with Smokey is that he gets crowd controlled easily. But you know, if you're running a Shakir, you do have the faction bonus. Yeah, and then someone asked me earlier, well, what do you do if you're facing against a let's say a Vala team? And this is why you run Scarlita, because you do need Dionel in the rearmost position in order to get the attack speed buff. However, the combination of Thorn providing 50% damage reduction to Dionel, or more like taking half of his damage, plus Scarlita shielding, it should be enough to keep Dionel alive. Okay, so that's pretty much Dionel in a nutshell. Well, it might just be random then, to be honest. Yeah, so now that we finished talking about Dionel teams, let's talk about Florabelle Zoo comps. So I'm going to do the variation without Frusto because that is probably more relatable. So it would be something like this.
Happy times are here.
Damien.
Check out my latest invention.
And the fifth slot is incredibly flex. I like to run a secondary, like another DPS, right? It could be Vala,
Treasure awaits us today.
could be Arden.
World has its own.
For me personally, I like to run Talene,
Brighten up the battlefield.
something like that. Oh yeah, and switching back to the confining spell. But there's many different flavors of the Zoo comp. Basically, the core of the Zoo comp is you have a solid tank like Thorin or a Frusto. And then, actually, I would do something like that. Yeah, something like this. Yes, so I would have like Florabelle, who is able to, with her EX weapon, provide a shield to all summons. So this would be Damien, as well as the shadows that are produced by Berial. Hey Colrath, good to see you. You're on YouTube. Final slot, completely flex. I would say just like, you could actually bring another healer if you want. This could be quite powerful actually. Now, if you wanted to counter... Actually, I would run a team like this. Well, actually, realistically, I would run a team like this. I mean, this is incredibly whale territory, but... actually, this is the team I would feel most confident about. The beauty of this comp is you have Thorn providing 50% damage reduction to Florabelle. Florabelle is a damage dealer, crowd controller, summons multiple summons, applies shields to her summons, applies shields to Damien's chariot, applies shields to Berial's shadows, and Scarlita kind of rounds out the team by keeping Florabelle alive, as well as the rest of the team, as well as serving as another win condition. Odie's not really a defensive hero. Yeah. Is nice for forcing attacking Dionel positioning. Damien in the far back position 1. Yeah. Now, the reason why I'm comfortable with having Berial in the back is because if Berial dies, it's okay because so long as you pick up a KO within, say, like 10 seconds, then your Berial will come back. So putting a hero on this slot to counter a Vala should be a hero that can either tank the attack well, or could be a hero who is disposable and can, recur. Now, Damien is a special situation because Damien initially, when he gets targeted by Vala, Damien will disappear and summon the chariot. And because Damien becomes an illegal target at the start of battle, so Vala will retarget onto Florabelle, which we don't want. Which is the reason why I typically have Berial at this position, not Damien. Okay, so I think I pretty much wrapped up all the main archetypes. Now, some of you guys may be asking, well, what kind of edge can I provide my team in order to have a more offensive team comp? Or some of you guys may be asking, well, what can I do to counter Eironn comps, which are arguably the strongest team comps in this game? Well, I don't have a silver bullet for that. I do have one suggestion, which a lot of my viewers recommend, which is to take advantage of the faction bonuses. This is something that a lot of people overlook. So Eironn teams are quite powerful, but usually they will consist mainly of wilder factions. And as you can see by this circle of life, the Mauler comp, the Mauler faction, tends to do very well against the wilder comp because they will take 15% less damage while also doing 15% more damage. And so this is where you may consider running like an offensive tech. Like what are some heroes that would be considered, for teching against an Eironn team? One of my personal favorites is Shakir. Shakir, because he is, even though he is a rogue, he's definitely a front line hero who is able to jump over the front line over to the middle and start cleaving enemies in the middle and back row, which tend to be the squishier units. Another consideration is Seth. And what makes Seth such a good counter to Eironn teams is that he specifically targets the weakest allies, the weakest enemies, which usually are like Arden, Carolina, the squishier comps that are taking the most damage or having the lowest HP. And the thing about Seth and Shakir is that both of these heroes do their own thing. Another hero that doesn't give to, who doesn't care about Eironn's crowd control is Reese. Now, in my server in particular, people are not running Reese. However, I have had viewers in the past run Reese as a tech against Eironn because Reese actually has an ability where he gains control immunity when taking control effects, defensive stance. And Reese is really powerful because, he's a mauler, he runs around, he's CC immune, and he crits. He's like a crit damage dealer who his ultimate hits really hard and can kind of snipe off the enemy line. Like our squishy units like Arden can potentially be killed very easily by Reese. On Tundra, Shakir, Coco, Odie, Haywen on map 3, sometimes they get stuck though. Yes. So those are some examples of how to counter Eironn teams. Now, in terms of countering just any team in general, some other cool techs that you can consider are Reinier. For enemies who haven't taken the time to position their heroes like we have to counter Eironn formations, Reinier can be a very powerful tool to swap an enemy support or an enemy back row or even an enemy DPS with one of your DPSs of your own. For instance, I like to use Reinier to dynamic balance my Eironn to the opposing side because Eironn is incredibly effective with crowd controlling as well as re-shielding himself, and if you send him to the back row, he is able to cleave multiple enemies doing magic defense shred more easily, making the back row squishier. Not to mention you send their back row to you, that way someone like, I don't know, like your Arden or just anyone else on your team is able to KO the enemies even easier. Oh, and by the way guys, there is also another tech, Sylvina. Hi Shift, good to see you, you're on YouTube. Sylvina, where are you? There are some people who like to run Sylvina because Sylvina is, I believe, the only hero that we have who you can actually surgically target an exact tile on the enemy line, any tile you want, so long as there is an opposite side. And Sylvina will always target someone, by the way, well, as does Vala. So you can use Sylvina in combination with Vala in order to take down a specific hero that you want gone. And actually, I think the best way to illustrate this is to actually do a battle. So let's go ahead and do a battle doing the Reinier Sylvina Vala comp. I'm going to actually target... Okay, so let's actually do this, because this is actually an example of how Reinier comps can be really annoying. Okay, so as you can see here, you have something like this where... Actually, this is not really a relatable team to go against. So let's... Okay, let's try to defeat a team like this. So this is a team that is the best defensive team in the game. Okay, and he actually almost smartly countered Reinier, except he made a mistake. I don't know if it's a mistake, but he made a mistake where he left his Eironn vulnerable to a dynamic balance with my Reinier. So what I'm going to do, actually, as a tech, is I'm going to dynamic balance my Eironn with his Eironn. That way my Eironn is in the back row crowd controlling his heroes and doing 15%, 25%, or taking 25% less damage, and his Eironn will take 25% more damage. What do you think about Shakir with Talene buff? Oh, I think that's... Okay, I'll talk about that too, Haddon. Actually, I could probably... Let's actually showcase multiple things at the same time. So... Well, if I can anyways. So I'm going to do... If we're going to do the Reinier strategy... Okay. Well, let me think here. This is going to take some creativity. So... we do something like this. And then we have Shakir. Okay, our formation's full. Shakir. Ooh, but we want... I don't think I can illustrate this here. Okay, I'll do it on a different map. So we do something like this. Do we have enough win conditions? I think we may have enough. Okay, let's do something like this. Okay, I might still lose. Oh! Okay, and then Vala.
What kind of treasure awaits us today?
Yeah, so we do something like that, and then Sylvina. Okay, I don't have enough slots, so we do something like this, where... let me just make sure I have my faction bonus. Okay, I do have a faction bonus, surprisingly. Okay, so basically the plan here is we're softening up his Eironn, and we're also targeting the opposing Eironn. We're taking out a win condition here. So let's go ahead and give it a try. Oh, thank the Lord. Okay, we won. So that's a way to counter an opposing lineup. When you, and I just beat the best defensive formation in the game with a team that isn't exactly meta, but as you can see, I was just like, who is the hero that I really want to focus down? In this case, it's Eironn, right? Like, how do you beat an Eironn team? Well, maybe you can hyper focus and weaken the opposing Eironn enough to where he doesn't really do that much. And mind you, this is the reason why I say like every team that you bring into an arena PvP fight, you should try to have at least 3 damage dealers. So in my case, the damage dealers were Thorn, Vala, and Eironn. Now I was getting kind of nervous because his Scarlita acted first, and I forgot that I didn't bring a Scarlita. I actually beat the opposing team without a Scarlita, which is kind of insane. And his Eironn and Scarlita are EX20. That's crazy. I actually am very impressed with that win there. Dynamic balance was timed so well. Yes, yes. And Reinier is incredibly powerful on offense because, as you saw, there were times when I was sweating it out, but Reinier would blink the highest HP enemy off the map, and this allowed me to have an edge so that I could focus down certain enemies. And even when the opponent Thorin was CC immune from Reinier's dynamic balance, I was still able to do enough damage to where I was still able to secure the KO. But as you can see, Thorn is incredibly powerful in arena PvP because he is able to do the Thorn cheese where so long as he doesn't die, he will absorb damage as he's charging up with his ult and then return the favor onto multiple enemies. And that's how Thorn can one-shot multiple enemies on the opponent's side. So that's one example. And I do want to showcase another example of Talene with Shakir, because that is something, it's kind of like unexplored territory that I think would be good to go over. Okay, so let's do something like this. So we have Shakir, and this is also well, the opponent's not running Eironn, but they're running a lot of Wilders, so this could still work out quite well. So we're going to do something like this. We'll do Ludovic.
The battlefield, a state of art.
And then we'll do Arden. Or Eironn, I guess. Okay, this is going to be interesting. So, do something like that. So, the thought process behind this team is that you have Talene applying the Pyre of Renewal on Shakir, granting him a revival blessing along with increasing his damage, or making Shakir do increased damage while also healing. And then you have Thorin, who is protecting Eironn. Actually, we could probably do something like this. Do something like that. Ooh. Okay. Alright. Well, positioning I'm not too sure about, but let's go ahead and give this a shot. So in theory, the idea is like Eironn is providing magic defense shred for your Talene. Actually, we might not even need Eironn. We could probably just run Scarlita. So something like this. I actually like this a little bit more. Let's go ahead and give this a try. So the idea is like, yeah, Talene and Shakir is a combination. You have Ludovic because Ludovic allows Talene to stay alive. That way she does insane amounts of damage and is able to stay in her ultimate form much longer. And then you have Scarlita to provide initial shields to keep your team alive, allow your team to stabilize. And then finally she'll come down and serve as another win condition. Alright, so let's go ahead and give this a try. So as you can see, Shakir is making the enemy line really mocha. Oh, okay, nice. Alright, so that's win there. Now this team needs more playtesting because this is a tech that the viewers suggested to me recently, like past couple days. I mean, Ludovic has only been out for maybe like 5 days at this point. But as you can see, this team comp is quite powerful because you have 4 win conditions. Shakir, Scarlita, Doran, Talene, and yeah, those 4. Ludovic is keeping Talene alive so that she does insane amounts of damage because she's in her ultimate form longer. And then you have Shakir, who is able to theoretically counter Eironn teams because he's a mauler. Actually, I do want to look for an Eironn team to test this team out against. We could... Oh, perfect. Okay, so this is a traditional defensive Eironn lineup. So I'm actually kind of scared, but let's go ahead and give this a try. Let's give this a try, guys. Oh dear Lord, have mercy. Ooh, we took out his Scarlita, that's good. Ooh, Talene, so powerful. Oh my god, guys. That was so satisfying. Did you guys see that? So we've shredded the most powerful defensive team in at least 2 different ways at this point. Very cool. Oh my god. Guys, I think I have my new favorite team. So yeah, wasn't that cool? I mean, if you kind of analyze the fight, what basically happened was that we were in a stalemate, right? Because the enemy's running double healer, right? Damien Haywen, how do you overpower a team combination like that? Well, you basically have an offensive team that is able to heal very well with Ludovic, have defensive options with Scarlita. You have a tech against an Eironn team where Shakir, he has the extra 15% damage bonus against wilder faction enemies, as well as taking 15% less damage. He is healing himself from his wolf state, right, when he ults. He's also getting extra HP from the Pyre of Renewal blessing from Talene. Even if Shakir was to die, which I'm not even sure if he did in this fight, he would be able to revive once with an EX15 Talene. Ludovic is keeping Talene in ultimate form way longer. That way she deals massive amounts of damage. You got the Thorn Cheese, you got the Scarlita Yeet, quite powerful. And I think the weak link in this team is just the way this team could potentially fall apart is if Ludovic gets KO'd. Mind you, my Ludovic's only EX5, so once I assemble the temporal essences to get him EX10, I think this team will be a lot more consistent. But anyways, wow, this video is almost an hour long. I'm going to end it here. If you guys have any other team comps that you think will be very good in arena PvP, regular arena PvP, do let me know. Yeah, and I will catch you in the next video.